So RPM is a method that's supposed to empower the learner to communicate thoughts, reasoning, opinions by going to the open learning channel in the instance of learning. Meaning that at different times in the lesson, throughout a lesson, then they will have different open learning channels and different closed learning channels. And the learning channels are the same for any of us. You have visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile. So our learning comes through these channels, our main learning, and then this kinesthetic and tactile are supported channels. So I'm going to be watching the students' self-stimulatory behavior, sometimes their responses and other things to help me determine in the instance of learning what learning channels are open or closed. So the visual is easiest. If they're not looking at what I'm writing, looking at the letterboard, I can tell that they're not being visual at the moment. They're probably more likely being auditory. When we're looking at this, with every child it can look so different because of the different aspects or ways that you could be focused in visually, auditorily, kinesthetically, or tactily. So for example, you and I, for the most part, I guess some of you here are the ones that were teaching, so a little different. So you and I, though, we're mostly have generalized, meaning that we can visually attend to what we need to. So all of you with generalized vision in the room are going to be able to look up at the board that I'm writing, be able to make eye contact with me at the appropriate times and with ease. So some of the individuals in here who don't have generalized vision, or may not have it, will maybe not make eye contact when it's needed. They may know to socially, but not be able to. Or may not be able to look at the work that I'm writing or something. Then auditory, same thing. You are able to listen to my voice, block out the extra sounds, the different noises that you may hear in the background. Whereas some of your children, if they're more selective at that moment, they may not block out those things very well. They may have a hard time and they just hear the clock ticking and block out other stuff. Or they may be more environmental, meaning that they're just taking all the noise in at once, whether it's processing all of it so they become overwhelmed, or they're just kind of hearing it like a boring professor. So the generalized basically means that you can go to the details and the big picture with ease and filter what you need to. Kinesthetic, all these letters, all these areas have generalized, selective, or global or environmental. So the kinesthetic would be generalized is I can write, I can move, I can stop and start my body when it needs to be. Selective would be specific skills, maybe I can write my name only, or I am able to move at this moment but not at this moment, move in this fashion but not that fashion. Global kinesthetic would be just sometimes the runners can't really stop their body when they need to, those types of things. Tactile is going to be touch. So selective tactile is kind of, it's like tactile defensive would be a good example here. So if your student will touch the spoon but not the pencil, that's a selective tactile. Global tactile will be more of a will touch everything. They won't distinguish with their hands the hot and cold, the feces versus pudding or whatever. So that would be that. And again, it can be intellectually, they can understand the concepts, but not that won't be encoding the stuff. So why does this matter? It's not like you have to sit there and constantly analyze this in detail, but it's important to know because the intervention you're going to do with RPM to make it effective is to help them become more generalized in these areas when they're learning, is the goal. When they're more generalized, then they're going to respond more as is expected in their outward skill and the inward skill. So for you and I, we are balanced enough that our cognitive or understanding and reasoning matches our behavior, and some people will refer to this as our motor and our emotions. So we're going to have a fairly good balance here. So if I see, I'm doing a puzzle, and I see a puzzle that I want to pick up and match, my eyes can look down, my hand can coordinate, grab the piece, and put it in. If your child's not connected here, they'd be able to look down, see the puzzle, but their hand doesn't miss aim, or doesn't aim right, maybe it doesn't pull out correctly. Of course, some of them do puzzles amazingly, that's can happen too. But there's just a mismatch. And they could be like, for instance, maybe they're amazing at puzzle making, but they're not spelling. It doesn't mean they can't spell, it's just that with puzzle making, something maybe is more pleasurable or something, so that pathway is formed, whereas for communicating, it's, if they want to, it potentially hasn't been formed yet. So let me talk about that more. So when you have a balance of your emotions, so your emotions too, you're gonna manage them, you can control them if you are in a moment that, unless you have really overpowering emotions, that you need to not cry out loud or scream, you will not scream or cry out loud. Where's your child? May. Or you also, if you're feeling happy, you will make a happy face, you will laugh. If you're feeling hurt, you'll have a grimace and such. For some of your children, they may feel hurt, but they can't make the hurt face. They might feel happy and they're doing something else. They may be laughing when they're miserable. So the emotion may not match this. So this is important to know, and it has to do with how their brain, everyone's different, all your children are different, how their brain connected and wired and stuff when it was developing through their life. So that's why autism and related conditions look so different. And it's because of the different learning channels and the way that their brain is integrated. It is not an issue of intelligence. When a child walks through the door, I assume the children understand me, and my experience is I haven't been wrong. They understand the issue is not a cognitive one, it's these connections. So, to help explain that better, any task, let's start with speech. Any task can be run through different pathways. You can potentially say a phrase or a word through an obsessive or OCD pathway. This pathway runs in a loop. There's an urge and a completion of a cycle. Just because you can say the words here doesn't mean that you're going to say the words when you mean to. A purposeful pathway. Purposeful pathway is going to be reasoned and intentional. Okay? So a student may be able to say it in an obsessive way, perhaps they can even use the words in a rote way, memorized. For example, maybe a student says, they count to 10. So they can say the numbers in order, and you say count to 10, and they'll count to 10. But then you say to them, what's 2 plus 3? Now they have to reason and say the word 5 in a different context. It may not happen even if they know the answer is 5. Because it's in a rote, I memorized how to say them in order, not in this pathway. In other words, this pathway hasn't formed for them to connect and say 5. This pathway it has. The same thing can happen on an iPad. Maybe they can type in their list of favorite words, their high preference items, those things. So it could be either a selective purposeful or like a pleasure. I'm sorry to spell. I'm scared. I'm teaching your kids how to spell. Okay, so a pleasure pathway or more of an impulsive or instinctual pathway. These can be different. Pleasure isn't always impulsive, but it can be. So these different pathways can control the same thing. So it could be words that they're saying, it could be pointing, it could be spelling, it could be pinching. So I had students that they could pinch me to death, but not purposefully. So they couldn't control pinching me. So the O2 was like, I need to work on pinching. I'm like, no you don't. Like, work on purposeful pinching. They can pinch me hard enough. So the purposeful pinching is different than pinching in an obsession or an impulse without thinking. So there have been times that I've said a student was running at me to like bite me, and I said, bite me right here. As soon as they thought about how to bite me, they could no longer bite, because it was now an intentional, and made it become purposeful. So unless they flip back into this impulsive or obsessive biting, they couldn't bite me the moment they started thinking how to bite. So that's important to understand that different pathways control different things. Therefore, when you see a skill that's only in this situation but not here, it's because the pathway hasn't formed and is not yet purposeful, or is only selective purposeful. So there can be times, for instance, that they say, I am thirsty, and they are thirsty, but that's what they can communicate is that in a few other phrases on their iPad or something. So it doesn't mean that everything's nonsense, it just means that, yes, if you see it in a different way, you know there's some knowledge there, but it doesn't mean they don't know things. So that's important to know. Any questions so far or desire for clarification on anything I said? Yeah.
Just one. So what's the context where they actually know what action to take, but they don't verbalize it? For example, take the notion of I'm thirsty. They don't use the words I'm thirsty, but in his case, for example, he'll just go help himself to a glass of water because he knows what it is.
Yes.
It's like, why do I need to talk, right?
Exactly.
And so how does that work reasoning wise?
Well, reasoning wise, again, he's doing purposeful action there. So he has a ton of selective purposeful, and a lot of his speech is purposeful enough, not all of it, but purposeful enough that he is getting around. When he's not getting it out is where the reasonings are taking place in the rules, he's not always selecting. So in the case of him just not saying it, he's probably just doesn't need to say it, so he doesn't. So I think it's a choice not to say it. If he never ever says it, it probably is just the action proceed like over through the speech. So he's like,
But is there a method to make the person say the action?
But think of it this way, sorry to
Go for
interrupt.
it.
If I'm thirsty, I'm not gonna say I'm thirsty and go and drink water, right? Cause I know how to go and drink water. So in his case, that pathway is already formed and he's kind of mastered it. Where he needs to probably work on is the other fields. So for example, Sam is actually in that OCD. He's drinking water every 10 minutes. Right now, right, for the last 2-3 days, right? So now I have to reason with him. Sam, stop for a second and think, are you thirsty? Or is that like a kind of a ritual that he's formed? For every 10 minutes I have to drink water and throw it in the sink, wash my hands. It's like a ritual, right? And it's a temporary thing because that pathway is not formed, or he's gone to a different pathway about water, and he keeps switching back and forth. So today, all we're working on is Sam. Think about it. Does your body need the water? Maybe it does, right? Maybe it does because it's hot or something, but it's super cold now. So why are you drinking water? Let's think about it. And if I tell him, Sam, maybe you should drink water now, he won't drink because he's not thirsty, right? So
Is the initiation, is it the initiation that just challenges them?
No, let's take that to the next step, right?
Yes.
So water is obviously one example, but let's say using the bathroom. So using the bathroom at home, obviously, we're not gonna announce to the whole world.
Right, yes.
Saying, I'm gonna go use the bathroom.
Yeah.
But let's say you are in a setting where you do have to excuse yourself to go use the bathroom. Because you might have an aide, or you might have a teacher, or you're sitting somewhere else, it's like someone's keeping an eye on you. So at that time, that communication, so it doesn't matter if it's speech or if it's whatever the form of communication, intentional communication becomes important for the other person not to jerk and say, okay, where are you going?
Yeah.
So it's, one is what they do as a student, in terms of, but then it's the reaction where something becomes overinflated just because of that communication piece, the lack of the communication piece, whether it's speech or otherwise.
it could be anything. It could be like signing.
Yeah, or if there's a bathroom crisis, like I'm gonna go.
Yes, so like in the case here with the water or something else, it would definitely be that he has selective purposeful speech and it's not completely purposeful or generalized to all settings. Essentially. So the behavior, the kinesthetic skills are generalized, hence why you can do all the self-help that he needs to do. So like so many of our students are generalized in one of the fields.
Something
Sure.
just to
Yeah, so
make your point.
sure, yes. So basically, yeah, so the generalizing, so some of your children will be generalized. So for instance, Michael right now, not to pick on you, but you're generalized. He's looking up, he's following the world, right now he has generalized vision. So this is not the case that he's not, sorry, thanks for being my guinea pig there. And Rohan, you're also being generalized right now. So it's possible.
This
to
is
do
the matrix. This is how I think about it. Where is Sam at that moment? He is probably right now selective kinesthetic because of the water, for example, He is, right now, he's doing a lot of puzzles these days, so he's probably global visual and global
Usually the
tactile.
puzzle is probably more generalized.
Generalized.
Or see, like, things like that, yeah.
And then very tactile, global, because he's stuck on his puzzles now. He's like wanting to do puzzles for hours
So
and
that would be
hours,
selective tactile.
Selective
Yeah, he just
tactile.
left out.
right? Visual will also be, what is this? Auditory. He's probably listening to music, but that's also probably selective because he has his own choice of, but this can change, right? Based on the day. Some days are great where he's probably generalized on all the VAKT. So this is what you have to remember, VAKT. Some days it could go all over, some day it could all be just selective.
Yeah.
So that's how I think about it when I observe Sam.
Yeah, that's perfect. And this is good because becoming familiar with this helps you, as she's looking at, to know what do you do about it.
So I mean,
Yes.
for Vedant, if I want to ask, he knows, I mean, I think his things are pretty generalized. He knows that I have to use restroom, all the procedures there, but he still waits for my eye contact.
Initiation.
My eye contact. The moment I have that eye contact with him, he's pretty independent. He does not need any help. And it is like across the thing. Be it his academics, be it his speech, anything. So I always have to make that eye contact.
Yeah.
Not even verbal prompting. Earlier it was verbal prompting or maybe gestures or something. But still that eye prompting is required. What is that?
A lot of it is a selective thing. That's why he's needing that. So he could be that. And you know, honestly, sometimes it matters which one it is these is. It's just nice to know it's not generalized. So basically, if you're having to prompt a certain thing, then there's usually some kind of a selective thing going on, chances are. Or unless it's like if you hit the prompt and then he does it, it may be his helping him focus in on that thing. So for on the letter board, you see that the extra letters used to be coming, that was selective vision. When he's impulsively writing down the word, that's selective as well. He's selectively, oh, that's the word, it's familiar, that's that. So like things that are more, a lot of your children that speak, they're more selective visual because they're not always looking at the eyes and general eyes to get all the speech out. That's why they're not speaking in full, in part, sometimes. So he definitely has that, but that initiation piece is the key with autism, and it has to do with the different mix of the senses. Don't get overly caught up in this.
Right.
It's very important, but it's not like you have to be at the moment knowing exactly. It's just good to know they're not generalized right now. They're gonna need some kind of a prompt to help them filter, whether it's to focus completely to get them out of this global, or to focus and get past the selective things they're looking at. In the back, yeah.
How does echolalia fit into, I mean, it can be generalized, I saw this here, this is the same situation, but it's not independent phrase formation.
Yeah, it's a selective speech.
Yeah.
So generalized, and that's happening in environment, when we talk about generalized, it means that it's under their control and full. So like echolalic is a selective thing where he's echoing what you say before he's reasoning. Whereas generalized, it's more that he can control his body and reason about it and then say it.
Well, see, I've seen, and maybe echolalia is the wrong term, him use a phrase that he has seen on TV when he's in a situation that's similar to what the character was experiencing.
Yes.
And a classic example is we were going through airport security and he says, "I'm not the mad bomber."
I love
And
it.
it was animated that, whatever.
Yeah.
He was relating to, anyway.
Yeah.
And it was appropriate, I mean, he
Yes,
felt
yeah.
that, but it wasn't his independent sentence formation.
Yeah, so I would probably put that, I don't wanna misspeak on the whole thing, but I would put that, it's kind of like a mixture of these things where he's reasoned about how do I use that phrase, because he can't pull out his own phrase, and so it's like taking an emotion, applying it to the situation, which is intelligence, right? So you know he's understanding. When as soon as that happens, you know he's understanding things, so I would argue he understands everything. He's just, that's what he can pull out of his mouth. So he has the words, so he's probably more in the selective speech, but he's not impulsive in that moment. What he did was, I can't get all these other words out, but this feeling matches this situation, out comes those words.
And is that
Yeah.
an impediment to RPM?
No, no, that's great communication. So in RPM, when we work with him, he'd get to the point that while he might blurt out the phrase from Batman in security, he would be able to spell out his thought on the letterboard in a coherent way. So he'd be able, because like the spelling slows the reasoning down and gets him so they can say it. So he already can spell words, we know he's literate, you know, all those things, he also is understanding. So when you do RPM with the different prompts, it helps him slow down, filter the excess and be able to say what he means. So out loud for a while, he may be still blurting out these great phrases for this situation, but on the letterboard, he'll show a very competent, coherent response. So very good question. So, yeah, most of the students in a lot of the areas are frequently in these two categories. Global's less common, but it does absolutely happen. So it's not your child's never there, but it's there. So if you're looking at it, Soma showed, she used to have a really good DVD that would teach about it. Now it's like a different one, I don't like it as much, but if you look at this, you can tell what letter I wrote, and you can see the details, because you're generalized. You can see the large picture, there's the L, that's kind of more of the global, but you don't call it global because you can flip between the L and the X with ease. I'm seeing X's making an L, that's because you are able to generalize that. So basically your ability to flip between the detail and that big thing, that's generalized. Same with the speech, or like auditory, I can hear the different sounds, but I can filter out what's not necessary and listen to what is. So you will have an issue with listening to what you should listen to when something's really loud, for example. Then you're like, oh, okay, wait, I can't handle that. Whereas your child, if they have a more of a selective auditory, would be distracted by a quiet dicky, you know, that kind of thing. Or will flip out of it when something like scary happens, like a big shout, then it'll take its back. Anyone will. That's actually a survival skill, right? So, thank you, this is good. I'm glad to get that. Yeah, so it's good to know because our prompts and our RPM fit that. So when you say rapid prompting method, you're helping the child filter, and that's really important, or not child, I mean, you are adults. It's important for your adult child or child, I guess, to be able to filter. And so the prompts are helping them filter so that they can initiate the movement. So if prompts are done correctly, then they will, one, be effective, and two, they will be faded. So if you hold back when a student needs a prompt, they're gonna need prompts a lot longer, and they're gonna practice some skills you don't want, like extra letters too often. If you prompt too much, also the same thing. Or if you sometimes prompt the right amount, but not with the right rhythm to help them focus in, because speech for any of us, communication has rhythm, then it can be hard. So then you will find the time the right rhythm. So don't worry about messing it up. Just do those things in mind. So don't be scared of prompts, but yes, if they're done right, they will fade out. So their students get to the point that you can just hold the letterboard and they can spell without you saying something. Generally, we do say something so people watching can hear, and we also want to get them ready to speak. So for each of your children, where you're heading with RPM may be different, but for some general goals, you're trying to get the student as independent as possible in life. Reason, have fulfillment in these areas. You're trying to build their tolerance to different stimulus, auditory, visual, tactile, kinesthetic, environments, the time, performance, how to be successful. Okay, skills, steps. So skills, you're trying to build their skills. At first in RPM, it's how to choose. That is to slow down and reason, and how to get their hand to select the right answer. And that builds 226 letters, and then you can fade that with time. And then it can go into handwriting, typing, speech, sewing, drawing, painting, any skill on its own, self-help can be worked on. Communication, of course, that's where most of you come for. Getting intentional communication. This right here can be a difficult one because you have them purposely communicating, but then you have the sensory integration aspect. So many students can intentionally spell something that doesn't quite fit reality, in a way that all of us can have that happen, but in a more extreme way. So then by learning to integrate their senses, this is where RPM, the more broader parts of RPM are really important so that they can really start pulling out things from their episodic memory and conveying them correctly to you in a way that matches the reality the majority would see. It's not that they're wrong, that's their reality is the reality, but that's what we're saying. Okay, so then education. or cognitive. Sometimes you'll hear both said. Cognitive goals, education goals. So a proper RPM lesson has all 4 of these, and I will focus them in a session, depending on the student. So a lot of the tolerances are connected, the goals are connected to, well, all are with the lesson, but the tolerance goals can be directly at the lesson, working this be a success. So it's still related, because they're in an environment they have to manage themselves. So say the student clears the table. They come in, they swipe the table off. Then we can work on the lesson about, say, George Washington, at the same time work on them having one thing in front of them and they don't swipe off the table. So you tape it down on the fly, as someone calls it. And then you say, okay, you're gonna leave this thing right here the whole time. And then they get good at it. And I bet you start placing more and more down until they can manage sessions with things all over the table. So you may have a tolerance goal that's directly related to the lesson, such as auditory goals. It could be tolerating that my mom or my dad is now being my teacher and talking to me in a teacher voice. Tolerating the topic of the lesson that's unfamiliar, not as fun for my ears if they're selective auditory once again. Tolerating the time, the amount of time that they're staying in a chair or standing or just being in the lesson itself. Tolerating touching every single letter without stopping and being able to be accurate. So tolerating performance tolerance is what this is. Visually being able to attend to the letterboard and to the materials, visual tolerance. Tactile
able to
tolerance.
sit.
Yep, where you sit, can you hold a pencil, can you touch the board even, or which one do you need? Kinesthetic, that'd be the movement tolerance and performance. Yeah. So you think of the learning channels, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, tactile are all within the tolerance goal, and you're basically helping them become generalized. It doesn't cure them, it just can help them so they eventually integrate enough for them to perform in a session. There. Skill goals, like I said, this could be a variety of things. Communication, it starts out more factual, there is some reasoning to that happens, and opinions, and then it builds into more of the story writing, to talking about the present, the future. In lessons, we don't address episodic memory directly, although they'll pull it up, but you can work on this as a skill outside of a traditional lesson to help them build their recall abilities. So students can have amazing memories, but to pull it out on demand can take a little bit of time and they build that skill. So for some kids, if you said, what did you have for breakfast this morning, they'll be dead on accurate every time because they're so focused on food, and for some, they'll never get it right. So that's what I'm talking about, the sensory integration for communication. They may be intentionally spelling out, I had French toast for breakfast, even though they never had that in their life, or they did a while back. But to get this so that they're integrating so they can pull it up to use a different matter. Then education is going to be the topic. In RPM, we want the content to be age appropriate, or if you have to fill in the gaps, taught in an age appropriate way. Because we're not assuming they just magically pick up all the information. There has to be education. So, questions on this or comments?
That episodic memory piece is very important because many parents come and say, oh, I asked him what he had for breakfast, but he said apple, but we had eggs. So he's not spelling, right? But that's that piece that Soma says. Don't try to test the student by asking questions that they have to pull from memory. That's why the lessons are crafted in a way like question, answer, known questions, right? Like from the lesson itself. Then once that tolerance is built, then you can pull. Now Sam is on point if you ask him what you had yesterday for lunch, because he's able to pull that now because of practice, right? But 3 years ago, he would just randomly say anything. So that's really important because parents always think he didn't say what he did, so RP was not working for them.
It's just the sensory integration, thank you. Because it wasn't like Sam wasn't communicating for a lot longer, it's just that he's now built an integration. So that's good, because I have students that they've all the times pulled out things to me and told me about stuff I had no clue about. So for instance, one of my favorite ones was I said, the lesson times at the end of the lesson when the student's fluent enough, I'll say, dear world, and they can say whatever they want, it's just a fancy way. And the student spelled, I hate soccer. And his mom gasped and said, we just signed him up for soccer and his dad's the coach. So I had no clue. But potentially if I had it known and I said to him, are you playing any sports? He might have said, yes, baseball. Who knows what would have come out? But at that moment, he visibly, the lesson had nothing to do with sports, I think it was like on a fake infantry or something like that, and he pulls this out. I've had other times he spell out a whole story and the mom's laughing because it was exactly the scenario of the morning, they just had characters of animals or something. So it's not that that doesn't happen, but it is, like she said, I have kids that when they're fluent with their parents and with me, I will start doing things like, I'm showing you a letter, I can't see, what letter was it? Some of them were like 0% at first, now they're 50% or 100. So again, they were spelling clean 3 years ago, but now they've integrated so they can talk accurately. So that's important to think. Communication is actually hard, but it's not that they weren't before, it's just the integration of senses. Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
just on that notion of sensory integration, the other thing that I have to constantly remind myself is the details that are important to me in an environment may not be the details that are important to Rohan in that environment. So his view and his perspective and his perception of that environment is going to be very, very different to my perceptions. So if I'm asking those kinds of questions, so who did you see or what did you do, the kinds of answers, I'm going to have to be flexible.
Yeah.
Where I'm not trying to pull the answer that I want, but it's really to say, okay, what is it that you're thinking about when we get
That's a really good point. I actually had a student spell to me, well, you're autistic back because you can't see my perspective. So I'm like, yeah, you're right.
So yesterday, I'll give you a real life example. Yesterday, we went to Museum of Special Arts. It's in Edmond, so I took Sam. For Sam, museum means Museum of Flight, right? So we went there, I was showing him all the artsy stuff, it was just so cool, and he kept saying Museum of Flight, that aeroplane, this is, because in his mind, a museum meant Museum of Flight, and he's so obsessed with that aeroplane, whatever. So everything, and he was like, where are the planes, right? And he was looking for the restrooms, and so, and it'll come with practice, right? I mean, so next time, so that was a lesson learned. So I'm gonna tell him beforehand where we are going. I'm gonna have him browse the website and talk about it in detail. And say, remember Museum of Flight? This is another museum where people just showcase their art. And so that kind of connection happens almost every day.
That's good. Yes.
Yeah, same with the sensory integration part. So when they initially spell, like they can come up random, and how does it like build eventually so that they're integrated? How does
Well,
that?
some of the things that she just mentioned, so you're basically, when you're going around in public, you're helping point out things to help them start becoming more aware of things.
Mhm.
But then also just RPM in general, because you're writing keywords as visual kinesthetic, you're spelling them out, that's auditory. You're constantly integrating the four and helping the student with the prompts to focus in. And so with time, sometimes it's just RPM itself that does that. But then what she's doing is actually RPM strategies. She's prompting his visual before she goes. Look at this, look at that. When she's there, she's prompting him back into the picture, so look. And some of it also was he's probably in the OCD speech. It wasn't his intentional speech. So I don't know what's going on. I'm not in Sam's voice. But he may have been going, there's an art piece, but he's so stuck on that thing that he's trying to shift and he can't get his mouth to say the things that are actually there.
And then when I put the board in front
Yeah.
of him, he says, this is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? So what he's saying through his words is not what he's feeling inside. And RPM, like she said, slows him down. Sam, now tell me, what do you feel about this museum? Right? And then he says, this is so beautiful. So that's the difference.
Yes, so with time, we kind of do those things, and then you start working on the other things. So one of the cool things that Soma has is the book, it's called Building Sensory Tolerance, it's a brown book. It's not very long, and it has some pretty simple activities, but they can make a difference. So working on your child is saying, I'm pointing over here, follow my point. We start with lasers and different things to help them start looking at where you're directing them, and then being able to mimic that. So a lot of it is just the sensory of everything that you're trying to do to help key them in. So you're talking, you're pointing things out for visual, auditory there, having them touch and feel and to try to integrate more and more.
Yeah, it has taken me years now, like since Sarul was 3-4 years and now he's 8, and pointing to the sky and where's the aeroplane. So taking the sound cue and where's the aeroplane and finding the aeroplane in the sky, and now he can finally do that. He actually looks and points. Or when he listens to sound, he actually look in that direction. But it actually took that many years, 4-5 years. Or even when if there is a flock of birds, then pointing to that, and then he can actually now spot it and will point it. Or if I, like the other day I was showing, this month was planetary alignment, so I was trying to show him, and he was actually trying to see when I was showing that's Venus, that's Saturn, or so he was actually making a good effort. It was hard for him, but he was making a good effort.
Yeah, it's wonderful, good example. Which kind of reminds me, you have learning, knowledge, this comes fast. Then you have the sensory integration for learning, sensory learning, and then you have the procedure. So, a student's, for all of us, this is the fastest. So if someone says, here's how you do a dance, they tell you the moves, you understand this is what I'm supposed to do. Then you have to get your body to connect, to sensory feel it, and then you do it. But you might at first do something funny, like learning a new language. I'm trying some other languages. My mouth doesn't form. I get what the person said to me of how to get the word out, but getting the procedure of it to happen is taking me some time. So this is for your children going to be a more extreme thing. So like in the case with Saral, he's knowing that there's a plane up there. He understands intellectually what he's supposed to do, but to get his biochem hearing it, auditory, get my eyes there, visual, get my hand up, kinesthetic, you know, all of that, integrating the sensory allows the procedure to actually look and do it. So this may take a long time. It's why school, the goal is right here, but their brain may be way past it.
Yeah.
So then they're they develop sometimes loops and patterns because they're being tested when this is like, I learned this 20 years ago, like why are we talking about this? But the procedure's not there yet. So with RPM, it helps build the procedures faster and those kinds of things so that you can get this going faster. And there are some things that the procedure may not come without effort that's maybe not worth it for that specific skill, so you try and find different skills. For example, for some kids, it's worth it to teach them how to handle money physically. For other children, it's better to teach them how to swipe a credit card, and that's that. So you may adapt for.
Tying shoelaces.
Yeah.
You cannot tie shoelaces, and we're like, that's fine. You can wear a slip-on and
Yeah.
it's just not worth it.
I replaced it with every shoe with that elastic thing.
Smart.
Going
I don't do either.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah.
So my son is minimally verbal with AAC support. So he communicates all his needs. Teachers at school tell me that he can communicate his needs, and we are able to understand him. But he cannot spell. He can only spell certain words which are repeated multiple times. So I walk him across the road and I just show him signs like stop. He says it's a hexagon. Yes, that's right. But what's written? He goes like STOP, individual letters, he can identify them. But then to put it together, he doesn't get the word. But if I read it out, Rahul, it's STOP. What is it? He says stop. Every time he reads, he cannot read it together and say that's the word. But if I read it, just like LIKE, like. But if I read it, he says like. But when he reads this, he's not able to read it and say the word.
Yeah, so it's a lot of selective skills essentially, or it can be selective purposeful because you need what he's saying there. But you also have, for instance, you say, what is that? He can know it says stop, but he's hexagons, what he learned in school for shapes. And so then he's saying hexagon or octagon or whatever it is. So so basically it's selective. So with RPM, you'll see more that integrate. And he has some rote skills. Some of the selective is he has rote skills, but it's in a certain way, right? I can say STOP, but I haven't learned the procedure to say stop. But if you say it, now I've learned to say, what is that word? That's stop. So like he has rote skills, but they're not completely together. But when he's saying STOP, in his head he can be going, that's stop. But he can't get it out of his mouth. So it's unlikely that he's not understanding that. Because if you've taught him and he's showing, then he has it. So it's there. It's just it's not coming out in the purposeful channel.
Okay.
So with time, you can start doing some prompts that can help him start to get it out. And you may, right now, say, okay, he spells it STOP, you say it, try and help him get it, oh, there it is, stop, and it might help him to start saying the words.
Okay.
So you have to kind of help with the initiation of it, but it sounds like a lot. Selective speech is selective verbal, essentially. It can fit into different categories, like it could be a selective purposeful. So when he's communicating wants and needs, he means those wants and needs. But guaranteed there's complex thoughts that go beyond that. So maybe he says, I'm thirsty. And maybe in his head he's going, wouldn't it be so great to have a water with a lemon, maybe a cherry inside, but he can't say that.
He's pretty
He
good
just
at
doesn't.
making it all for
Okay,
himself.
good, good, so yeah, so that's excellent. So he may have a generalized kinesthetic then, so maybe generalized kinesthetic, selective verbal skill,
Right.
that when with RPM, he'll be able to tell you. So he may, nice thing for him then is if he wants to go, maybe he can make his own drink when he says I'm thirsty or something, but. So yeah, so kinesthetic is generalized if he's able to do all the self-help and motor plan through all of that pretty well. It probably is pretty generalized for the more part.
Okay.
It would be other skills that would get in the way of some of it. So maybe he has an elective visual or a selective auditory at times that may make him struggle kinesthetically when he does certain things, like say stop.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a, because I guess speech is a kinesthetic skill to a point since you're like speaking itself, but it's also like an auditory and other stuff. So again, it can be generalized in multiple situations and then suddenly it's selective. Yeah, so you'll kind of see with RPM, you start with the choices to slow it down because what's missing for a lot of kids with verbal is the reasoning piece. And it's not that they don't reason, otherwise he would be able to make his food. It's that he's not responding before he reasons. He's responding before he reasons. So then he needs to slow down, stop, reason, and then respond. And that pathway to be that purposeful is not there for the speech outside of the pleasurable wants and needs, essentially.
I've also noticed that he's had sometimes a regression. So you teach him something, and then you move on to a certain topic. It's been about like 1 or 2 months. Then you come back to it, then he regresses it. So does RPM help me there?
Yeah, so it'll help you there because again, what he's demonstrated is most likely from, so maybe he has the speech right there, but then it's not purposeful enough that he can keep pulling it out. Of course, he's gonna forget some things because we all do when it comes to like recall of stuff. But if there's like a regression that you feel is more extreme, it's just due to it not being fully formed in this purposeful pathway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question, yeah. What other questions before I keep going? Yeah.
So my son, he reads few words, like he knows PE and 10, then he knows SEVE and 7. So if he reads the letter PE and pen, and then again if he had a chance to read the number SEVE and 7, so he says SEVEN, but he says pen, not 7. So because it ends with EN.
Yeah.
So he gets confused there, and every time it happens whenever we practice reading, and so it's hard to understand what is going on, so.
Yeah, I mean, what you could do, again, it's a selective thing where he's not reasoning, his speech is in selective mode. Essentially, he could be saying, it's 7, but he's in this habit of it's gotta be pen, right, as E-E-N. So outwardly, he's manifesting selective. It comes to that like cognitive, behavior, motor, and then the emotions. So cognitively is like that's 7. But the trigger is impulsive, and so outwardly it's motor, planning, pen. So I mean, if you were to show him when he gets like more down to the RPM, we can do it now, if you said to him, is this a number or an object? Then he could say number for you. And then you say, okay, now let's look it over, which is the number you're seeing, 8.7. So he would be able to do that for you, but it is just a selective skill that's just stuck for him. Yeah, and good question.
If I can add,
Yeah.
Renee, so reading is also scanning. There are a lot of skills needed just to read. So as first he has to scan SEVEN, then he has to look for the word from his memory and then pull it. And so there are lots of steps involved, which is why, you know, I was also under this impression, right? 3 years ago, I would have said, well, Sam cannot read, you know, at age level, so how can he go to college, right? But there are accommodations in schools and colleges where right now he doesn't have to read anything, it's all audio. Because his skill, his strength is audio, so we shifted the, you know, his strength instead of his weakness. His visual is his weakness. So instead of pushing him to become better at his weakness, we switched it to what he's good at, which is his auditory. So, and colleges and schools have this accommodation. So you can go and say, you know, I want all the lessons to be in auditory. Once he listens, he will spell 7. You know what I mean? So if you see Lene, she can say SEVE and she can show it, and she'll put like 2 pieces, choices, SEVEN or TEN. He will touch 7 because he's moved that speech to his kinesthetic now. So every time Sam has an issue, when I look at that matrix, I try to shift from the weakness to the strength. So suppose if he's not able to work on his, kinesthetic skill, I will say, Sam, let's have a snack so he can, kind of distract it to another sensory channel and then come back again. Not to reward him, but more to kind of understand what his issues are and how can I move that to another channel. So say he's not able to sit, I'm like, okay, let's go to the treadmill and spell. So he's moving, walking, but he's able to spell because I just moved his tactile to kinesthetic. Right, so when I think about those channels in my mind, I don't have to even tell him. I keep switching it. Okay, you're not able to listen to this song. Let's do yoga, just to move from auditory to kinesthetic, right? So that really helps. But I think he knows at 7. He's just not, like she said, he's just not able to say.
And that's very common, because this is what I would say to you, anytime your child is not manifesting age-appropriate behavior, it's unlikely a cognitive issue. It's going to be a sensory integration issue, and again, it doesn't mean, it can be how they're perceiving the world around them, or it's just it can't come out because the reasoning pathway with control is not there for them to produce for you in that manner. So it's good. So it should get better with time. So for example, for some of the selective skills with the reading, you might have something that says like, something like this. Okay, so if I have a student that can read or verbal, but they're not fully purposeful, it's gonna sound like this. That goes in, is a document that governs the United States. So they get to these big words, it's like a mumble or a consonant or something else that kind of starts with that. And then is, that's not right. So this right here is not happening because they can't read this word. The student can spell to me Constitution, and even I've had it where I said to the student, okay, what's that word? Spell it out, define it. So actually on my website, I have a video of a student doing this, and I have to define all of it. He now can read this statement, no problem. But it took a little while, but before he could say, he could spell out Constitution is, found in Washington, D.C., written by the founding fathers of, so he could have told me what this is if he had education, of course, not magically knowing. So, anyways, so that's what you're gonna see with a student that has some selective skill or not fully purposeful in their speech, is this is not gonna come out, it's not generalized speech.
And this is where the schools are missing the point, right?
Yes.
Because they are evaluating our kids based on that output. So if he says pen, when he looks at 7, they are gonna say, oh, he cannot read that.
They are working on the data.
Yeah.
Whatever they are doing,
But they're not understanding
They're not
this
understanding.
piece of it.
Yeah, which is why your children get stuck on the goal for year after year after year after year, because they're not actually doing the intervention to allow it to happen. And it's not that they're not doing good things, it's just that's gonna be lagging if you're testing the cognitive knowledge when it's really something else. So, same thing can happen with like drinks, as student steals the drinks, and they say cup, they go to drink it. They can write on a letterboard, I should not take other people's drinks because it's unkind. There are germs in these drinks, I could get sick. So they can tell me this, walk out of the session and go steal another drink. Because it's like they have to encode all the sensory, they have to stop their body, which is a generalized skill. Don't reach out to that, but for them it can just wipe, and it comes before they reason through that. And that happens to us at the store. Well, that's cute, put it in the cart, and go home and say, why did I buy this? I don't really need this, I don't want to put this in my house. So that's impulse shopping, is just not quite as fast and furious as our children can be. So, okay, that kind of help with the sensory. So your prompts are helping them to be able to manage and get through it. Michael, do you want to come up here and I'll have you do some demonstrating? So Michael's pretty fluent, and very fluent. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks for helping. So I'll let you kind of say, if you want to say anything, you can definitely say something with this. So just kind of just see how he's spelling. He's very fluent. This, of course, is a different environment. Now he's in front of everybody. So it's a little bit more pressure, but he's good at it. So he can answer some questions too if you have questions, but I'm just gonna show you some things that I do to help him as he's in front of you, to spell. So do you have anything you want to say first off? Yes, okay. Can I put this on you? Because you're talking. Okay. Now you can talk. When you say the letters, it might come out a little bit better for us. Okay. Don't worry about that. Sorry, it's on your arm. There you go, okay.
I-D-O-N-T. W-A-N-T. O.
I don't want to. Impulsive. I don't want to be impulsive. I'll write it down. It'll be okay. I want to be impulsive.
O-I-N-G-T-O-N-T-O-P.
Going to stop. So I'm stopping when he's kind of just hesitating and swinging his hand, that's why I'm putting it down. That way you can kind of get a visual break so that he can start scanning some. Going to stop.
B-E-N-P-U-L-M-I-P-W.
Going to stop being impulsive now. I like the resolve. Going to stop being impulsive now. Okay, great. I like the commitment. I'm gonna try myself to stop being impulsive. Who do you think's gonna do better at it? It's for fun.
M.
Me, okay. Well, we'll see. Okay, great. Yeah, so good. So, does anyone have questions for Michael? And then you can decide not to answer or to answer based on what you want to. About his journey or anything that he can help explain for you?
What do you like to do, Michael? What's your hobby or what's your leisure activity?
I love music and art. I love music and art. And
Go back. N-O-N. Y.
and astronomy. Love music and art and astronomy. Those are good ones. Cool mix. All right, anyone else want to say something? You want to say anything else?
N-O.
No, okay, excellent. Well, thank you. So you kind of see kind of how it works. So this, I'll take this from you now. Thank you for wearing it. You have good sense and tolerance for this. So yeah, so this is advanced level. You notice he was verbally prompting himself, so I didn't have to say anything to him. So at first it doesn't look like this. It's reach out, lift your hand. Like there's a lot of prompts to help him get his eyes tracking, to get them generalized, auditorily to get his self-focused inside, because your auditory is inside your head and outside in the external environment. Help him focus on the words that he's spelling, tactily being able to move around, visually scan, and get the kinesthetic movement to keep going. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. You may stay up here or you may go back to your seat, whichever you like. Okay. Thank you so much. Did you want to get the blue? Yes, sorry. That's all for you. Okay. Yeah, thank you. So it's good to see, so your children will have different sensory systems. Michael, he has a more calm body now. Some of this will happen with age, some of it happens because of just how his sensory system is combined. So he has more generalized tactile, he can sit in a chair, he can stay there. Some of your children don't. It can work with them hopping all around. I have some students that sit there and hold their body kind of squatting, they play with their toys, spell for me, and they hop up to the next place, sit down, and they spell for me some more. So you just have different students and they can improve with all of this. So there are some that are moving the whole section for the first times. Then they slowly get to the point they can sit in a chair and you'd never know that they've got around. Others, they have a number of years that they move a bit more, but they get more contained and more controlled. So, and this is not, this has a variety of reasons. A lot of it is just, that's just the way their senses integrated. Sometimes it is certain interventions help them, and other times it's just, that's just how they are. It's not
I
gonna
think
be.
it's developmental, they just mellow, many kids mellow out as they get older.
Mhm.
Little kids are so difficult that they get a lot
I think
better.
neurotypical kids are also
Yes.
difficult. It's
The
like
wiggle.
we just
Yeah.
look them from the eyes of being their autism or whatever, but I think neurotypical kids or the ASD kids, they are same. Kids are
They move around a lot, yeah. Being a children, you're kind of right? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for me so far before I go on to some other things today? Yes?
With the letterboard, and I'm noticing that you're using one that's see-through. The question is, what the child sees. Do they see the outside? Do they see?
Depends on the student. So we have a variety of tools that can be used. It's not like an official board. So there's stencils for some of the students, that's the best. It gives them a nice good tactile and catch their finger. They can see through the holes a little bit. So that's kind of nice. For others children, that's like unnerving to be able to see through. So then something like this would be used for them, so they don't have to have that. Others look at this, looks like a wall to them. So it's too much. The stencil may bother them and be like dizzy to see through the background. Or others would love to have something like this where they can see what's going on behind them. They spell a lot better this way. They don't feel like it's a wall. So maybe they can do stencil in this, but not this. Others can do all of the different ones. And then to begin with though, because we're dealing with the selective vision, auditory, those kind of things, a lot of times we'll start with roll letterboard. One to teach reasoning or spelling skills for younger children particularly, but then even for older children so that they can, or older students so that they can work on the scanning and the tracking and the control. Then we might start with a half board and then the full letterboard. Or say that they're swiping and grabbing and crinkling and they can't do that, or just for the time being, then we might use something like these, the Modify Stencil, they'll split up. They can poke a pencil through it and aim that way. And some have very good motor, but they love the feel of the pencil going in and out and that kind of a thing. Some need something to stop their hand, but they're still poking. And so the stencil's not a good option, a plain letterboard's not, so we put a little piece of tape and the stick-em helps slow them down and help them stay with it. So in other words, there's a lot of different tools that can be modified, or for some students with very severe motor challenges, because a lot of your children have good motor skills, but it doesn't mean that it's generalized, meaning they may still need to learn how to use them purposefully. So with that in mind, then you might have to use, like we have some that use paper choices. Well, lots of them use paper choices at first, but there are some that we might hold up 2 paper choices that say, do you want your letter to begin with something then A to I, J to R, S to Z, and they pick the section, the letter. If they have really poor motor, it might be, do you want something between maybe those 3, then they pick A to I, and then you'd split it down. Do you want A, B, C, D, or E, F, G, H, I? And then you'd hold up the 4 choices for the letter or whatever. So there are some that might go through a number of steps. It's very rare if they have like cerebral palsy on top of something or there. And then, but for the more part, most of them can go from 2 paper choices or 3 paper choices to rolled or half board to full board. It's very rare that I see a student that can't make it to the full board, particularly when it's just autism. It's just autism, it's never a problem to get them to the full board.
And what about a student who's gone through Tech to Learn in school and is used to a QWERTY keyboard?
Yes, it's no problem. In fact, sometimes we'll take them away from the QWERTY keyboard just because there can be a lot of impulses there, but it won't like stop their progress. So once they get really intentional on the letterboard, then we start transferring it back to the QWERTY boards and other things. Yeah. So if they're in control, like they slow down and reason, they're fine to stay with the QWERTY. One reason why we also use this size of a letterboard is because it's a good navigational size for books and maps and things that you deal with. And so then they get used to the full range of stretching and aiming, where the QWERTY is kind of smashed together and small. So if you're trying to help them resist impulses, for instance, so if a student has like an impulsive spelling, that you'll say like, tell me a word that go, like a food for Thanksgiving. And they go P-I, they're probably gonna spell pie, and also they go A-N-O, piano, guitar. And so all these like instruments come out all of a sudden. Then I will have them, okay, pick. Is your first letter gonna be between A to O or P to Z? Then they tell me which side, and then I'll show them that side. So I slow them down so that they can't impulsively spell guitar and piano and basically have their word hijacked by their external verbal coming out without reasoning. So with the QWERTY, there's so much letters are so small that when they're trying to learn purposeful movement, like I'm sure son has very good motor skills. The motor pathways that we're building with him to be purposeful. So then we would use more letters. But technically, it's not wrong to use a QWERTY keyboard letterboard. We have them as well, so you could use it. It's really what is helping your child succeed in there. So we also have, once they get fluent, do I have them in here? I pulled them out. Travel-sized, oh, there's one. This is another board, but we have travel-sized letterboards and stencils too, for kids that can be that precise. You can put it in your purse and go around. Yes, it's ultimately ideal that they get back to typing with, or spelling, or handwriting, or speaking without someone holding it, but it is a step that can be life-changing and help the child. So why are we holding the boards, actually, the question we should answer. For you and I, we all have our performance preferences, so where we would prefer to be. So like for me, I get out my phone, and if I'm gonna text someone, I'm gonna be like this, right? That's how I like to hold my phone, about this level where I'm at. But you may like having it more out here. You might wanna text this way. So you may have a preference, but if someone forces you to text a certain way, you can manage. You can make it work. Whereas your child, because of the lack of integrated senses, they can't adapt that easily. Again, it's not an intellectual issue, it's just the way that they're seeing things. So when we're holding the letter board, it's gonna be in different spots. So, Michael, thanks for being here. When I was holding it for Michael, it's in a pretty natural position right now. But some students, they start with where their eyes and hands are at, way down here. I'm holding it down here because they're just, the way they move their hand for purposeful stuff is not the same. So if it's high preference impulse, some of these motor skills are amazing. Grab that piece of candy, rip it open, no problem. Now you have a non-preferred item with the same kind of motion, suddenly they can't open it up because it's not purposeful. So same thing here, maybe on their iPad they can type these fast, speedy words of their favorite YouTube videos, but then they go to spell their open communication and their hand's like, well, where am I? So you're holding the board down here at first, and then it gets more natural until it's in a better range. So performance field is what we call it, where they are successful. So you're looking at how the joints of the arms and hands work. So you have the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, the fingers, they move them. So some students are like stiff, but they move their fingers like that. And they are really good. But this student, if you put it out here, is not gonna succeed. Right here, they will, because they can move their hand to the corners this way. Other students cannot move their fingers and wrists. They're going like this. They have to have their board out like that so they can spell. Other students are throwing from their shoulder, so they're gonna have it way out there because they're throwing from the shoulder there. So they can learn to get more and more comfortable, but for a time, you have to find where they succeed. It is not a magic letterboard. This is also for art. So I have students that on the table, they're scribbling or they're not touching it at all because their eyes are very global or way up here. They haven't learned to look down yet and be comfortable looking down. Then they're not gonna draw anything. But if you hold up the clipboard in the performance field, you might have to train with motor modeling, but they can draw. And I was really jealous one time because I had one student who had never drawn a thing in his life but a scribble. And as a child, I always wanted to draw a cat that had like its tail coming around with the body, and I could never do it. When I held it up and he did it, first try, I'm like, oh, this is how you do it, okay. So it was just, it's the performance skill that allowed him to move around and do it. In other words, he knew intellectually how to draw a cat, but until the accommodation was there, he couldn't motor plan through that. So it's not a letterboard spelling woo-woo thing, it's an actual literal field that they have the most success with. So in RPM, we want to broaden that. So once they're really good here at their comfort zone, clean spelling, they're spelling out their thoughts, I want them to start holding it, getting used to their other hand moving it, get it flat on the table or get it propped so it's not quite as comfortable, and then getting good at that. Different heights, different places, and then building the visual stamina is important. So I actually have like laser pins, I'll point and get children to start turning their head and look for a while. And I had some that was so hard for him, he actually lunged at me because he was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like just looking over there was just so sensorily painful. So in other words, slowly you have to work on getting him to look so that he can actually encode his whole environment to encode situations. Again, back to that sensory integration piece, it's more than just intentionally spelling, it's actually learning how to integrate.
Just to add to that,
Yeah.
Sam was really struggling with graphs. In his college, he had to, there was one whole chapter that he had to do on graphs, and we were really struggling. I got him to Lene. She held the whiteboard like this and just drew X, Y. He got all the answers right. So because I was focused on go point to this on the screen or on the paper, and I was putting it flat, all she did was put it here in his visual field, and he cleared the whole thing. And then we got the graphical board, and during the test he used the board and he could point to all the coordinates. So it's more about accommodation than he doesn't know graphs. He knew graphs, he just did not have the accommodation to bring it to his visual field.
Yeah, thank you so much, yeah. So that's a big part of it there, is that accommodation piece. So in our RPM, for the last little bit, I'll go over some of this. The lesson planning is a very important in how you do the lesson. So the basic skeleton of RPM lesson, you want to have the teacher's performance and the student performance balanced. So I got a little scale here, if that was there. So this teacher states like a sentence, and then asks, and the student responds. Then as the student starts to responding in longer words, then the teacher will respond saying the longer. She might tell a little story, and then he talks. And then she tells a story, and then he talks again, or whatever. So you're going to work on this back and forth movement, and it should feel like a flow, because that creates a rhythm with the student. So this is important to keep in the balance so that a student can succeed at spelling. So it will be how you teach a lesson. You're trying to simulate those for our channels, learning channels. So you'll start with, for instance, if they're a younger child, you might say, the sun, S-U-N, is in the sky, S-K-Y. And then you say, so what did I say? The sun was in the S-K-Y sky, or the P-O-N-D pond, or whatever. So then they pick, and then you will say something to respond, yes, sky, or if they pick the pond, you say, if it was reflecting, yes, it would be, and then you would go on to your next statement. So then you might say clouds, and you may want to draw clouds, C-L-O-U-D-S, clouds are also in the sky. So what else is in the sky? And then you'd ask, would it be B-I-R, or I guess you could say E-L-E-P-H-I-A-N-T, elephants, or C-L-O-U-D, clouds. So you spell it out and you'll write it on 2 pieces of paper generally. Now some students don't need that. If they're in control, they can already do choices. And if they're older, so they see as much written words because they've been exposed more, then you can start on letterboards, whether it's first letter, or if they're very impulsive with the choices, then if I say to them, so what did I say? We have like clouds or elephants in the sky. Now they can go at the scan, where's the cuss sound? So then suddenly they won't hit elephant automatically, they'll look, find the C and get it right. So I have some students that paper choices, written choices are disaster because the impulse was so easy, but the spelling is simple. They actually slow down and they do it. So when you first start with your child, a couple things to mention is this. As a parent, or if you've interacted with the individual you're teaching for a while, then you're going to already have an encoding that's happened, where they've already mapped you to be a certain way, they have rules about you. So of course, don't be shocked if it's a disaster at first, for a while. It can be a disaster. So you just have to persevere, and the way to get them to encode you in RPM and like accept it is to keep doing it and do it a short amount of time so you can survive.
And also to add to that,
Yeah.
mom versus dad or someone else, like with mom, he's doing fine. But when dad holds the board in front of him, it's like all over the place.
Yeah. So they have to learn, anyone new will have to learn the process and the method. Once they learn with about 3 people, generally it gets easier with each person. The person can be less competent about it and do pretty well. But the first person has a hard job. You have to get there right, there's little nuances and stuff. So just persevere, keep it short, try and get some consistency there. And then other things you can do is, number 1, when you go home today, if you're not already doing this, talk age appropriate, their chronological age. So what this does is it helps start the pathway of presuming competence or intelligence, meaning that you believe they can learn and that you're seeing them as an intelligent being, and that changes everything. Number 2, talk like they are there. So don't say things that if they were able to talk out loud as quote unquote neurotypical, that they would get really mad or really hurt. Don't say that in front of them. So what I will often do, because for instance, when you come to a session with me, I have to talk about this child while they're there. Oftentimes turn to your child and say, I know that you're listening to me and aware of what I'm saying, so that they recognize that I'm aware that I'm not blocking them out like they're a subhuman. And then I talk to the parent. And I also sometimes will say to this child, now you know all the secrets, that's just fine. It's good for you to understand what I'm doing and why. Because there's not, I'll even tell a student, I'm using your operant condition situation to do this to get you from quit hitting me. So that they know that I'm very aware, and it helps them also become aware of themselves. So I don't try to be secretive with this child either. There's no like secret window I'll tell them. Once in a while I'll prefer a child not to hear, like the day I tried to quietly say, I'm calling her an expert so that she will perform for basic tasks for me so I can just kind of assess it a little bit. So then I say, you're my color expert. She's a little child. So now, if you're looking at a stop sign, what color would it be? So I was pretty sure, but just to check it, I'd had her be the expert and then she could talk. So those kind of things, just because I want the child to feel like I was being insincere, because I was sincere, then I might say it quieter, or not at all, until like a text or something. So talk like they are there. And 3, start reading. Read age-appropriate stuff. If they don't tolerate it because they have selective auditory, that's what that is, then just say, hey, you know what? This is going to be good for you to hear more language. I'm going to read for 1 minute today, and then slowly increase. So I heard of one family went from 3 minutes to 30 minutes. And this can help get them ready for this process and kind of encode you as someone teaching, someone that they have respect from in that regard. 4, start dialoguing and pointing things out. So you can say, oh, look at over there, they're building a new building. Last week when I came past, they only had the metal. Now they have some other things. Look at that. Ooh, I wonder what it would be like standing on those bars over there. Look at that guy up there. Or something else. Ooh, I think they're making an ice cream place over there. Oh man, I forgot the bread at the store. We have to go back. Sorry, thanks for being patient with me. Let's go get in the car. I know you have to deal with me like this all the time or whatever. So just talking to them so they hear about it. Or say you say, go get your shoes. And they sit there and you're all okay, we go to prompting and you say, okay, I can see your body's feeling stuck. Let me help your body figure out how to get through the shoes. Because you know what I said. So let's you see if we can get you to stand up. Okay, let's see if you can notice where your feet are at. Now turn here. So you're gonna talk them through it, so then they know when they're not getting in trouble for the sensory system not connecting to walk to the shoes. Because the world is a 3D letterboard. So that's why we start here. This is 2 dimensions. When they master this, it's easier because now they have to walk to a room and aim, and the whole time they have to keep their mind focused on that task. And that can happen for us. I was trying to get something done, And I went to the place to go get it done 3 times, and I was like, I still haven't done it. Something distracted me. I was like, okay, this has been an hour. Okay, so it can happen to us. Now you add this sensory lack of integration in a big way. That can happen like every time. So then you have to prompt them to keep them focused until they learn the pathway to do it. So dialogue, talk to them, and then prompts. You're basically doing RPM in the regular environment. Yeah.
One other thing I wanna add,
Yes.
fifth is probably, there's no prerequisite for RPM. There's no like, oh, he's not sitting for 10 minutes, so he cannot do it. You need to start, like she said, just start in 3 minutes every day, then 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And, you know, Sam was like all over the room the first time he met Soma. Now he can sit and tolerate for like 45 minutes, 1 hour of his classes. So it will come. There are going to be some rough days. That's when, you know, all those sensory, and RPM is just not the letterboard, like she said, it's everything around him too. So it's the 3D itself is RPM, the 3D life that he's living is also RPM.
And also just to add to that, Sam or Michael or Rohan, they all are adults now, so they have built a lot of foundational skills over the years. So comparing our 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10-year-old to them is also not reasonable. So thinking that if Sam started doing it in 3 years, then why is my son not doing it is not right. So
Yes.
so no comparisons of that kind is usually kind to yourself and to your students.
Thank you, yes.
So where does independent expression come in?
So in the lessons itself, it builds into it. So at first, you're starting with getting slowing them down, making sure the reasoning's happening. Then as the accuracy builds, it comes to the lessons. And then it slowly builds from there. So when you start, it's gonna be like that basic thing, and then it starts going, what else is, so you said, like, the sun is in the sky, what else is in the sky? So it starts out with safer things, factual stuff, that and then you'll start getting more broad. So you say, if you're going to put something in the sky, I would put a, and then they can spell out their own word. And then eventually they'll actually sentences, essays, and stuff like that.
But where's the expression, I wanna go swimming today?
Sure,
Without
yeah.
being asked.
So then it will come with time. So naturally, the byproduct is communication. And some students can tolerate more letterboard outside the session than others. But if, say, you need to talk about what they want to do, you can integrate it to the lesson if needed so they can express fully. Or if you're going to go on a vacation and you want your child to talk about that, then you can do a lesson on vacations and then they can contribute their thought and their opinion with the family. So a lot of times if you have the lesson, that stimulates the reasoning, which gets them to communicate better and more accurately. But then many students outside the lesson can just say exactly what they mean and they need.
And then what does an independent communicator look like?
Well, I mean, he was independently communicating, but as far as like communicating with nobody holding a board or something like that, it can be just sitting there typing, and then you slowly build yourself further away from the student. So right now, I think the one that's most advanced is Soma, who made the method her son. So she can be upstairs and he can verbally dictate and handwrite his thoughts, type it out. He types extremely fast, fucking like this fast on a keyboard. She has to speak in the room.
Go to the grocery store and communicate with the cashier?
He can with her being around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think one of the things we always have to remember is they may need some support from time to time, but not to worry about the type of support they're receiving and to reduce what they are capable of, and they can be capable of with that support, right? So yes, it may not be safe to send them out to the grocery store by themselves for other reasons, right? There may be other safety concerns that one might be worried about. But they may, once you get to the grocery store, they might be able to navigate, get the stuff they need, pay the cashier, and still meet up with you by the front or something like that. But you just don't want to leave them all by themselves because of whatever it is that you're working on.
My goal for Sam is not independent living and all that. My goal for Sam is to make his own decisions. If he wants to live with mom, he should be able to live with mom. If he wants to live in an adult family home, he should be able to. How is he able to decide that? Because he can communicate, right?
Well, it's interesting, your point too, I mean, when you talk about impulsivity, there's a difference between impulsively touching things on the letterboard or keyboard and running across the parking lot.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
So
And-
self-determination is a big peace in all of this. I think we all want that for our children. And even if they have someone looking after them, for them to be able to determine exactly what their day looks like, what their program looks like, what their food choices look like. So people are not making those decisions for them all the time, and they're making informed, intentional choices.
And yeah, right now if like we are flying in 2 days and we have done a lot of RPM lessons with him. What are the things, you know, he cannot do because of, you know, some societal rules. But instead of saying, Sam, you can't do all this, I give him the reason why he cannot enter a women's bathroom, why he cannot go, you know, touch everything in Starbucks and buy everything at the airport, right? And there are going to be stores that are closed and he should not get, that really stresses him out. So talking to him about it in an age appropriate way, and every day we talk about it. I'm like, Sam, what are 5 things you think people should not do at the airport? And he's able to tell me, oh, these are the 5 things. And I mean, obviously at that moment, his body may not cooperate, but he knows, right? So now I can reason with him. You know, we talked about this 2 days ago, remember? So we're going to do a lot of lessons because I'm really stressed out about the travel, but I can see the difference. I'm telling you, it's night and day from, and the body will regulate itself too through practice, I guess, because he can now reason, oh, mom told me 2 days ago I cannot touch that because I may get in trouble if I just open something and start eating at a store without paying, right? So it'll come, but with a lot of practice. Yes.
And in addition to RPM, I think one of the things that we forget when being parents of special needs kids is agency.
Yeah.
So regardless of, you know, what methodology is out there, they need to be able to choose and control, have some control to some extent. If we're constantly telling them, don't do this, it's like, well, the expectation is we're gonna have to sit here. But you have a choice. You wanna sit here for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And once that's done, you know what, we're out of here. So the more agency you give them, the easier it starts. So we've had that. When he was younger, he was, you know, dysregulated, running around everywhere. Over time, we really showed him that, look, you are in control of your space. And he was a reader, so we would, you know, write these social stories, and all he would need to do is either point or pick some of the choices. And even in school, he built tolerance that way. He had an incident, and then after that, we pulled him out, said, this is not working for us. In our case, the school district came, and a number of people got involved, and we developed a program. But we worked on tolerance. So we're not like working on 20 things. He spent 30 minutes in school. And that was the expectation, just 30 minutes, which went to an hour, which went to an hour and a half, which in the beginning was in my presence. And then slowly I got faded out. So if you see him today, you're not even thinking any of that, right? Like, yeah, he can go and.
We can write a chronicle about it.
Yeah. So, and we built that to a full day of school, and then he actually loved the Transition Academy, and it was his choice to do that instead of a regular community college at the time, because he really liked it. He liked being able to do all of the vocational tasks and go out to lunch and drinks and all of the fun stuff that they do. And then he finished that, and now he's like, yeah, I want to, you know, pursue my education further, and so he's doing that now. But these are choices that it took a long time. And I feel like there's self-determination, but we want to take it to the next level, right?
I think the hardest part in all of this is here, in our head, not in their head. They're fine. It's in our head. That took me the longest time. Once I came to a level where I started presuming competence, I gave him more power, you know, treated him age appropriately, it just flipped. Everything flipped for us. So whenever a new person gets introduced to him who's using the letterboard, I always say, he knows how to do it. Do you know how to do it? You need to get trained first, right? Because he's doing it with multiple people. So I think our mind needs to shift, which takes the longest time. The earlier we do that, it's better for us, and you're not spending 17 years waiting on other things to magically happen like we did.
So I have a question, right?
Yeah.
So something that you were sharing is one thing that I really struggle. I just don't know if my son is getting it. That is like the hardest part because, as part of preparation for tomorrow, right? She's